Welcome to Hudu Politics, where the headlines get personal and the truth hits harder. Today, I'm about to tell you a story that's not just surprising, it's explosive. Just recently, right in front of a national TV audience, Congressman Schiff did the unthinkable. He openly confronted Donald Trump, directly, fearlessly, and without holding anything back. No filters. No polite politics. Just one man, one microphone, and a message the entire country needed to hear. This isn't just political drama. It's a turning point. Let's get into it. The stage lights flared into brilliance. Music blared from the speakers. The crowd, of which I was a part, erupted into a tide of clapping and cheers. The voice of Stephen Colbert rose over the noise, rich with charisma and a hint of mischief. My first guest tonight spent 2 decades as a congressman from California, Stephen declared, building anticipation like a seasoned performer. He served as an impeachment manager and sat on the January 6th committee. Just last fall, he was elected to the Senate. Please welcome back to The Late Show, Senator Schiff. The name struck like a bell. Schiff. A man who'd stood in the center of political firestorms, a figure reviled by many on the right and lionized by others on the left. Now he was walking on stage with a composed smile, shaking Stephen's hand like 2 old friends reunited. I was seated in the middle rows of the studio audience, soaking in the energy. The applause gradually ebbed, replaced by that warm mix of curiosity and anticipation that you only feel when something unscripted might happen. "Good to see you again," Colbert began. "It's been a bit," Schiff smiled. "It has. Since the last time you were here, you got elected to the Senate." "You're welcome," Stephen joked. Laughter echoed. Schiff chuckled. "That's called the Colbert bump. You remember that?" Stephen added with a wink. "Absolutely," Schiff replied, leaning in. It was light, almost disarmingly so. For a man who had been the subject of presidential tweets labeling him a traitor, who had faced threats and censures, Schiff sat remarkably at ease. But I could tell, watching from my seat, that beneath the composed exterior was a reservoir of experience that would soon come spilling out. The shift came when Colbert asked, "When you visit the red districts in your state, are people ever surprised that you're not the shrieking demon Donald Trump portrays you as?" A murmur rippled through the audience. There it was, the first jab. Not unfair, not cruel, but a surgical strike of satire. Schiff leaned forward. "Oh, absolutely. I asked for a position on the Agriculture Committee. We're the #1 AG producing state in the Union, but we haven't had a senator on it in 30 years. Part of the reason I wanted to do it is because agriculture is crucial not just for California, but for the entire country. But also because it gives me a window into what the deep red parts of California are like, what folks are thinking, how I can serve them, how I can relate to them." He then told a story that would become the first emotional peak of the evening. "I recently visited Butte County," Schiff said, "far northeast of the state. It's a part of California that actually wants to secede and become its own red state. I met with the Farm Bureau there, a very conservative group. They were kind of standoffish, a little suspicious. What did this big city Democrat want?" He paused, letting the image settle. "And after a while, they warmed up. I said, 'Look, I'm just here to learn. I want to represent you. I want to fight for you in the Senate.' By the end of the meeting, I could tell I had made some progress. One of the farmers turned to me and said, 'I don't know why the president calls you watermelon head. You have a perfectly normal-sized head.'" The room erupted. I found myself laughing, not just at the absurdity of the insult, but at the candid honesty in the farmer's voice as Schiff recounted it. "And that's how we bridge the gap," Schiff added. "1 inch at a time. 1 watermelon head at a time." The first moment of real resonance had arrived. It wasn't just a story, it was a metaphor. Politics didn't have to be a war of caricatures and monsters. Sometimes it could be about showing up, about humanizing the other, even when the other had pre-labeled you as inhuman. I sat back, more invested now. This wasn't just a senator talking policy. This was someone stepping into the lion's den and walking out with a nod of mutual recognition. That moment, between Schiff and the farmer, and now between Schiff and us, was a reminder that American democracy, bruised and battered as it might be, still had a heartbeat. And we were only getting started. The lights dimmed just slightly as the show went to a quick commercial break, but I stayed glued to my seat. There was an electric tension in the room, everyone could sense it. Schiff had charmed the room with a watermelon joke, sure, but we knew the temperature was about to rise. This wasn't just light entertainment. We were headed into the heart of the conflict, America's divide, and California's own. The lights brightened again. The band played. Stephen welcomed us back, and the cameras resumed rolling. Schiff was still seated, smiling, but now his posture was more upright, like a man preparing to dissect a painful truth. "You've spent so much of your career investigating Donald Trump," Colbert began, "from Russia to impeachment to January 6th. And obviously you love your state, you respect the people in it. But there are parts of California that voted for Trump. What do you think they didn't hear from you? What didn't they see in that first term that others did?" The question hit with weight. Schiff didn't flinch. "One thing that becomes very apparent when you visit these deep red parts of California," he said, "is that we're living in parallel cultural realities. There's a cultural divide in this country, and you feel it intensely in places like Butte County, the San Joaquin Valley, parts of the Central Sierra." He wasn't condescending. His tone was that of someone who had walked the ground, not just read poll data. There are also real policy tensions. Water rights, for example. Fights between farmers and environmentalists over who gets what. These are deeply personal issues to the people in these regions. But the most striking thing to me isn't just the policy gaps. It's that we, the Democrats, haven't shown up. My ears perked. Here it came, the high note. We haven't competed. We haven't introduced ourselves. We haven't said, "Hey, we're here. We care. We represent you too. And if people think you look down on them, or worse, that you're indifferent, they won't vote for you." There was a pause, not dramatic, just long enough to let the weight of those words sit with us. "People aren't going to support someone they think holds them in contempt," he continued. "And that's the message they've been getting, from silence." In that moment, Schiff wasn't a senator. He wasn't a Democrat. He was a messenger from the front lines of the American divide, reporting back to those of us who thought progress came from policy papers and press releases. He leaned in. "You know, when I go out to these areas, people are surprised when they meet me. They've seen a caricature, on Fox News, in Trump's rallies, in angry social media posts. They think I have horns." A ripple of laughter passed through the room, nervous, knowing. "It's kind of a revelation," Schiff smiled, "when I don't." Stephen asked the obvious next question, "So what do Democrats need to do?" "We need to press the case, everywhere," Schiff said. "Even if we know we won't win over everyone, there are so many people we can win over. But you can't win over anyone if you never show up." That line landed hard. A few people clapped, quietly. Not the roaring kind of applause for a good joke, this was the kind of clap that comes when truth slips through the cracks of performance. From my seat in the audience, I realized something: this wasn't about winning elections. Not really. It was about rebuilding trust where it had eroded, even rotted. It was about restoring a sense that public service meant serving everyone, not just your base. And as Schiff finished his thought, I caught a glimpse of something rare in politics: honest vulnerability wrapped in strategic clarity. "We've got work to do," he said. "All of us." The lights dimmed again. Another break. But no one was going anywhere. The real show had begun, not the televised version, but the show behind it, a national reckoning, unfolding one conversation at a time. The lights came back on slowly, and I could feel the room inhale again. By now, we were all locked in, not with popcorn, not with laughter, but with something deeper, anxiety. A shared unease. You could feel it in how the audience stopped fidgeting. We were preparing to go somewhere darker. Colbert sensed it too. His tone dropped into something more solemn. Let's talk about the possibility, just the possibility, that Donald Trump is re-elected, he said. You've said that would be dangerous for the country. What's the danger you see? Schiff exhaled before answering. It's the dismantling of the rule of law. That's not rhetoric, it's what he's promising. He's made no secret of it. Donald Trump has been explicit: if he returns to power, he intends to use the Justice Department as a weapon, not as a shield for justice. A heavy silence fell. He continued, he wants retribution. That's the word he uses. Not reconciliation. Not unity. Retribution. Stephen leaned forward slightly. And you'd be one of the people he goes after. Schiff gave a weary nod. Yes. He said it. I've been censured by his allies in the House. I've received death threats. My family has had to have protection. All because I did my job. That was the moment it hit me, not just as a viewer, but as a citizen. This wasn't performative politics. This was a man calmly describing what it's like to be hunted for upholding the Constitution. Schiff shifted in his seat. We're in a very dangerous place as a country, because we're normalizing threats against public officials. Against prosecutors. Judges. Even jurors. People are being threatened for simply participating in the justice system. That's terrifying. The crowd was silent now. No coughing. No whispers. Just breathing. Stephen asked, almost rhetorically, and how do you explain that Trump remains so popular despite, or because, of all this? Schiff didn't flinch. There's a combination of things. There's grievance politics, deep-rooted resentment and fear of change. There's disinformation, millions of Americans trapped in a media bubble that tells them up is down, wrong is right. But also, we have to be honest, he projects strength, even when he's weak. And in a country that feels uncertain, people sometimes mistake cruelty for power. That line rang in my chest, cruelty mistaken for power. Stephen nodded. You've said something else before. That Donald Trump is someone who burns everyone around him. That even his allies can't survive him. Schiff gave a rueful smile. That's right. Donald pisses off everybody eventually. Laughter broke out, sharp, cathartic, almost startled. Look, Schiff added, just go down the list. Rex Tillerson. Jim Mattis. John Kelly. Bill Barr. All these people who served him, praised him, even they eventually got tossed under the bus. Because loyalty, for Trump, is a one-way street. It was a moment of release, but also revelation. A reminder that the danger wasn't just ideological. It was structural. Trump's entire leadership model was built on destruction. Of norms, of trust, of people. Schiff looked at the audience, not the camera, not Stephen, but us. This isn't about me. This isn't even just about Donald Trump. It's about whether this democracy is resilient enough to survive someone who doesn't believe in it. Another silence. And then, a soft wave of applause, not prompted, not staged. It came like a reflex. Not to a man, but to a warning. And from my seat, I realized we weren't watching a guest on a talk show. We were listening to someone who had walked through fire and come back with a message in his hands. A message we now had to carry ourselves. The lights dimmed. Final break. One segment left, but the most important part of the night was already burning in our minds. The stage lights brightened again as the show returned from commercial. The energy in the room hadn't dropped, it had shifted. The audience, including me, was now in that perfect state of being both entertained and deeply engaged, ready for a final act that might tie it all together or blow the lid off entirely. Stephen leaned forward, smirking. He had that look, the one he got when he was about to toss a slow pitch that turned out to be a curveball. "So," he said with faux innocence, "have you ever considered thanking Donald Trump for launching your Senate career?" Laughter burst through the crowd like a firecracker. Schiff smiled, but there was something else in his eyes now, a glint of history, pain, and irony braided together. "Well," he said slowly, "you could argue he gave me a lot of name recognition. The wrong kind." The room chuckled again, more measured this time. This was the emotional climax we'd been building toward, the long shadow cast by a single name, Trump. Colbert jumped in. "You've been censured, vilified, nicknamed, Shifty Schiff, Watermelon Head. And yet here you are. You outlasted him in Congress. He's a private citizen under indictment. You're a senator. That's gotta feel a little satisfying." Schiff nodded, his hands folded carefully. "Look, I never set out to be in a feud with the President of the United States. I got into politics to write laws, to help my state, to make things work better. But then, history had other plans." You could feel it. The temperature of the room changed again. This was the moment, when the man dropped the armor. "When we were investigating Russian interference," he continued, "I didn't expect to become a target. But Trump doesn't operate like past presidents. For him, the playbook was always to discredit the messenger. Attack, belittle, distract." His voice dropped half an octave. "And when you become the messenger, well, you get the treatment." There it was. The turning point. The one every story needs. He told us about the death threats. The doxing. The armed man who showed up outside his office. It wasn't graphic, but it didn't have to be. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the studio lights. Schiff wasn't playing victim. He was walking us through a battlefield most of us never see. Colbert, usually quick with a joke, said nothing. He let the pause breathe. Then finally, "That's a heavy price to pay for public service." Schiff nodded. "But you know what? It's worth it. Because the truth still matters. Because democracy is still worth defending. And because the minute we decide that intimidation wins, we lose something far greater than an election." He let that hang. "And besides," he added, light returning to his face, "you have to find ways to laugh. Even when it hurts. Especially then. Cue the final gut punch joke." Stephen grinned, sensing the moment. "So, what's the weirdest Trump insult you've ever gotten?" Schiff smiled wide. "Oh, that's easy. One night, after I'd done a cable interview, he rage-posted and called me, wait for it, Little Pencil Neck Adam Schiff. He's got the thinnest neck I've ever seen. It's like a number 2 pencil. Tiny brain too." The crowd erupted. I almost fell out of my seat laughing. "And you know," Schiff added with perfect timing, "that's when I knew I'd arrived. Because in Trump's world, an anatomically based insult is practically a badge of honor." Colbert leaned in. "Did you ever want to respond?" Tempted, Schiff grinned. "But I figured, if someone's gonna call you a pencil neck, you don't fight back with another insult. You beat them with your work. And if you're lucky, maybe your neck outlasts their legacy." That line hit hard. Because behind the absurdity, the mocking, and the childish name-calling was the truth. The institutions of democracy aren't destroyed in a day. They erode slowly, unless people show up to defend them. And Schiff, for all his quiet demeanor and understated humor, was one of those people. As the segment drew to a close, Stephen stood and extended his hand. "Senator Adam Schiff, everyone." The audience rose. It wasn't a raucous standing ovation, but something warmer. More intimate. Earned. I stood too, clapping not just for the guest but for the journey we'd all just taken, from laughter to vulnerability to resistance to resolve. The music rose again. The cameras zoomed out. The lights began to dim. And I walked out of the Ed Sullivan Theater into the New York night thinking, that's what democracy sounds like, not a speech, not a tweet, but a conversation. One watermelon head at a time. One pencil neck at a time. And still standing. What do you think about this? Comment below, and hit the subscribe button for more politics drama. Thank you for watching.